Hello and welcome to Focus Delaware. I'm your host, Bob Weiner. Tonight we're honored to have Honorable Michael N. Castle, Governor of the state of Delaware. We do hope you join us for a stimulating show. We'll be right back. Governor Castle is our guest tonight, and I'd like to ask you, do you miss the private practice of law? I know it's been a few years since you've been involved in that.
Well, Bob, to tell you the truth, I was involved in the private practice of law right up until the time I became governor a little over 2 years ago, and I can't say that I miss it much. First of all, it's challenging and difficult and time-consuming, and secondly, I'm so busy that I don't have time to even think about missing anything other than than what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis as governor. And I enjoy this job so much that it's just very fulfilling, and it's challenging, and at times it's difficult, but I just enjoy it, and I don't really miss the law. Someday I may return to it, but right now I don't miss it at all.
Well, you've been in the limelight, nationally speaking, of late. As a matter of fact, you're the chairman of the National Governors Association Welfare Prevention Task Force, which developed the policy approved by the governors recently in Washington. Can you tell us about that effort?
Well, it's a very wide effort in some ways and a narrow effort in others. It's a wide effort in that we're trying to address a lot of problems in education and poverty in general. It's a more narrow effort in that we think that the actual welfare reform policies in this country are outdated, don't work, and need change. And when I say we, I'm speaking for literally all the governors in this country, a number of whom have started programs similar to what we have done in Delaware, that is work programs for people. But we essentially think that welfare should be a work and education-oriented program with an income component as opposed to a pure income program in which you might have some work later on or whatever it may be. So in Delaware, we started a program called First Step, and we are requiring that some people who've been on welfare for 5 years or more will report for classes in remedial education, in job skills, and just general work skills, whatever it may take, in order to get them in a position where they can go out and go into the workplace. We think this benefits everybody. We think it benefits the individual greatly because they are being given an opportunity that nobody ever gave them before. We think it benefits society because these people, instead of continuing to receive welfare, will now be out contributing economically to our society, and it's just a very uplifting thing. I have visited the classes where this is taking place, and it's one of the most exciting things I've had a chance to do as governor. These people really showed great appreciation that people cared for them and were willing to work with them and to give them a real opportunity in life. And I just think it's going to work. And in Washington, we met with the president on a couple of occasions. I was on television with Senator Moynihan and Chuck Hobbs, the policy head of the White House. And we just did a lot of things. Went over to Congress and talked to them, and the governors were in unity. And I just absolutely believe that this country has come to an understanding that we can take welfare policies and make something of them, something much more than we have before. And if people ask me the reason, I really think it's acceptance of women in the workplace. A lot of the aid to family with dependent children programs are really designed to help women. About 95% of the recipients are women. And food stamps and Medicaid programs are also somewhat in that category. And when we start to put people off of that, it just turns their lives around completely. This is a great opportunity, and it will only happen though if we work really hard and we really stay with it. You just can't talk about it. Each of these cases is very difficult. We have to work them through. But in the long run, I think we can change the welfare programs of this country. The presidential candidates are talking about it, and it's just that time. And it's been tried before, but this is the time I think we're going to get it done.
So you're now working with the White House and Congress. In addition, you're beginning to look further into the prevention aspect, I understand, specifically, as you mentioned, early intervention, child care, and child support enforcement. What new legislative initiatives can we expect?
Well, we are going to be doing a number of things through the budget process mostly, as opposed to a lot of legislative initiatives where we do so many of our changes in Delaware. We're trying to do things in the prevention mode, as you said. We have a program called Focus on the First 60 Months, and that's sort of a misnomer because it's really the 9 months of pregnancy and the first 5 years of life. But my feeling is that that is probably the population which is least spoken for in this whole state and perhaps country, because obviously they can't speak for themselves, and that we need to do more for those pregnant women and children who have medical problems, maybe nutrition problems, maybe early education problems, or whatever it may be. And there is a very strong, compelling argument for this, because if we can prevent medical problems and medical help later on, if we can prevent learning disabilities, juvenile delinquency, dropout, perhaps crime, whatever it may be, we're going to help society a great deal. And you have to really bring all these programs together. You talk about welfare reform, and you talk about prevention programs such as Focus on the First 60 Months. You talk about child support. We're doing a lot to make sure that fathers support children. People have to understand if they're going to father children, they're going to be paying for it for at least 18 years. And we're trying to bring all these different kinds of programs together to take that perhaps up to 20% of our population, which has not had an equal chance, and give them an equal chance and have them contribute to our economy and to society, to give them an opportunity and to help them make a better life for all of us. And I just think it's something which can be done. There's a lot of excitement about it in Delaware. This is the perfect kind of state to do it in. When I talk to the people who work for us in the government, I tell them we have an opportunity to be the best in every single field there is. And this is one area in which we really want to get an upper hand and get things moving. There's some sad stories involved. Our infant mortality rate has been too high. We have a high incidence of teenage pregnancy. Teenage girls tend to have very early births, and they tend to have low-weight births, and this leads to deaths and other problems. And this is something we have to combat in Delaware, and we intend to address those problems too.
Let's turn to a subject now that's on everyone's minds, taxes. Now, you have an advisory council called the Delaware Financial Advisory Council, which quarterly, I understand, estimates the fiscal year revenues for the upcoming year. Now, the Delaware Financial Advisory Council has estimated fiscal year 1988, which begins July 1st, revenues of $38.8 million due to the Federal Tax Reform Act of 1986. Why doesn't Delaware zero out this tax increase to Delaware taxpayers rather than spending it?
Well, there are a number of reasons why that will probably evolve the way I think it will, which is how we've proposed it. One is we've had tax cuts each of the last 3 years in Delaware, and in 1979. We've reduced our rates dramatically. We are just starting another tax cut on January 1st of this year.
Yes.
And the legislature really has not had a chance to meet yet and to focus on this. In the meantime, that money is theoretically accumulating. But what we've recommended is that money be spent for the first year, and that we depend upon last year's tax cut to keep our taxes level. And then next year we proposed even another tax cut to take away any gains we might have had because of the federal tax reform. So as a result, ultimately the taxpayers will do very well as far as that is
concerned. So you will zero it out eventually.
Yeah, in Delaware, Bob has done better in terms of tax reductions for its taxpayers than any state in the country, probably at any time in history in this country in the last 7 or 8 years, and we're very proud of that. And ultimately that will be done too. But it's a logistical problem to try to do it in the middle of a year. And in addition, we are taking that money and we are applying it to the new north-south road, which we need in the state, and some other fundamental things that we have to get done. I'm sure there'll be a lot of tug of war and all this before the legislature decides in June, but I think ultimately they will well understand that doing a tax cut is a good idea, but keeping the money for 1 year is also a good idea.
Very good. Well, Mike will be returning shortly. Don't go away. We'll be right back. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm speaking to our Governor Mike Castle. We're going to talk about spending for social programs. We've just talked about taxes. Now, since you have recommended that a great share of the tax increase be allocated out to spending programs, when will we stop hearing about how backward Delaware is regarding these social services?
Well, we had a long time, Bob, where Delaware really did not do what it should have done in social services under Democrats and Republicans. We obviously, through the 70s, had terrific financial problems. And we did have to make adjustments in our economy and our tax structure, and as a result, education and a number of social services were deprived. We then went through a sort of an upheaval when children, youth, and their families was separated from health and social services, and they were probably both underfunded after they became two separate entities. And we're just starting to come back from all that. We now can well afford to do these things, and we're starting to address them. I think education was first. In 3 years now, we have built education to the point that teachers are the 15th best paid teachers in the country in the rankings of all the states. But we're still looking at the questions of health and social services and children, youth, and their families, the real basic social service programs, many of which are aimed at those who are in some way have difficulties, problems, mental health, physical health, or whatever it may be, or in a poverty situation. And this year, the increases have been fairly dramatic in both of those areas. They were last year, too. And as a result, I think a lot of programmatic changes are being made. A lot of effort is being made to change these things to community programs. That's true in mental health. It's true of the mentally retarded. It's true of children. We're trying to get away from institutions and get people into homes where they can have a more normal, caring type situation. That's expensive because you sort of still maintain your institution as well as do your startup programs. So there are a lot of expenses there, and I think the real fuss over it may be the emphasis you might put on one particular segment of the population versus another. And some group will say, well, gee, we need more homes for our group or whatever it may be. But in reality, I think when people look at the overall budgets, they're well satisfied with what's happened in recent years.
Very good. Let's talk about revenues for the counties, a topic of concern to those in Newcastle County government as well as the other governments. We understand that up to $15 million of federal revenue sharing will be lost to the cities and the counties in Delaware in fiscal 1988. Why doesn't the state simply replace the federal monies withdrawn with part of the windfall? Isn't it unfair to hoard the windfall or tax increase without replacing the federal monies lost?
Well, the truth of the matter is, if you're running a civics class at the University of Delaware, what you would say is that the state of Delaware has too high a tax structure, that we tax our people too much, and you would say that the counties and the cities don't tax enough because our real estate taxes are extraordinarily low. And they have been very reluctant to raise these for obvious political reasons. Each year they don't want to have a 10% real estate increase or whatever it may be. So we go through that struggle, and as a result, the taxes tend to run behind. So now that the state is doing well, everyone says, well, why doesn't the state hand over the money? Well, the answer really is that the counties, particularly Kent and Sussex counties, I might add, have really kept their tax rates so low that they're among the very lowest in the country at this point. The state needs to have a good balanced tax policy, one in which we can induce businesses to come to Delaware and induce other businesses to expand in Delaware so that we have a continuing good economy. And if we take all that we have and don't give it back in the form of tax cuts and other things that we have been doing, I'm afraid a lot of businesses may say we're going to leave. And I also don't think that every county and all 60 of our cities should be coming to us and saying, we expect you to help us. We really have to go into this together. So our answer is that we're meeting with all of their financial people. We are looking at their problems. We will try to help where we can. But we don't want to become the sole source or the primary source of some of their programming. I think some of the federal funding was in excess anyhow. They probably don't need all of those employees or those particular programs. So that has to be trimmed a little bit. And I think we'll strike a balance before the year's over. And as a matter of fact, our people have been working on it very hard in the last couple of weeks to come up with some solutions that will be mutually acceptable.
You've been pushing, as you mentioned before, welfare reform and the first 60 months programs. There are critics that are saying that these programs aren't being funded, and they're wondering when the programs will get up to full speed. How would you address those critics who make that expressed concern?
Well, I'd like to get them into a conference room someplace and bring in my secretaries, Tom Eichler and Chuck Hayward, and some of our division heads and our budget people, and sit down and show them what's happened and show them they clearly don't understand with what they are arguing. They simply don't know the facts as far as the dollars are concerned. We've made terrific increases in these areas. We are starting programs for medical help for indigent people, so that some of the working poor, those who are starting to work but can't afford medical help, will have medical help. We have started a lot of different areas in the prevention programs for children with startup money. We are taking the WIN program, which is basically our work program for the welfare people in Delaware, and funding it 100%. It used to be 90% federally funded. So we're just taking a lot of steps to fund and address a lot of these things. And I think it's just a question of misunderstanding, or some groups which will just say no matter what you do, we expect more money and we can use that much more money.
Let me turn to a subject of highways, a subject near and dear to my heart. Now, of course, on Route 13, you've made many statements concerning your support for the Route 13 bypass. In light of the limited federal monies available, is it wise to commit $20 million to what is expected to be a $750 million project, while so many other highway needs improvement to support future economic development throughout our state?
Well, we are really doing this with surplus revenues in one particular year, and ultimately we may have to look to other sources of revenue. One of the primary sources may be to make it a toll road, and that is the decision which we are looking at right now. We would still maintain the old Route 13, but we would have the new road, particularly for those people who wanted to move faster and not go through congestion or go through towns. And the work of the last year has been really extraordinary. They have gotten together, they have decided what the route is going to be, they have essentially placated all those who might be concerned about that, and we're ready to really move ahead. But it is a 12-year project. If we have all this in place by the year 2000, we will be very, very fortunate. Now, parts of it may start hopefully sooner rather than later, and Kermit Justice is bound and determined to get it done. But it's going to take funding, and it's going to take state funding, and we'll still have some federal funds. That's not going to dry up completely. And if we don't start doing it, it's never going to get done. So we made the decision that this was our opportunity this year to take a big chunk of money, $20 million, and start it for that project. And I hope the legislature will support that, because I'm afraid that if it doesn't get started, it will never take place. Thereafter, we'll look at the type of funding we will do, and the states around us are all raising their gas tax, so sometime in the future, we'll probably have to look at that kind of funding again too. People believe in roads; they're important.
They do, and as a matter of fact, the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, has many needs that are being identified all the time, and unfortunately, the slippage is taking place more and more now. With the Highway Trust Fund, they're releasing dollars, it seems, less frequently in order to meet the constraints of Graham-Rudman, and as a result, Delaware's getting less of a trickle of the federal dollars, and so the list of needs on the CIP keeps growing, and yet our ability to meet those needs seems to not keep up with its pace. What's the answer?
Well, we're one of the few states that's managed to maintain its federal funding at 100% level in almost all the program areas that we're in, because Kermit watches that very carefully and balances all that. So we're pleased about that. But they're not increasing their funds at the rate you would hope they would increase them, is really the problem. There is some restraint there. And one of the answers is that we have to look at that. We have to consider our own tax policies, our own gas tax policies, and what we're doing there. We have to make sure that we supply good roads to people. They expect that. We've had terrific growth. If you look at the Pike Creek Valley and Concord Pike and just a lot of other areas, you see what that growth has done. And we have to make absolutely sure that people can move around easily. One of the great benefits of living in Delaware has always been the ability to get relatively easily from one place to another. We don't want to become a Philadelphia or a New York. So it's a vital question, and it's something we worry about on a constant basis. And it has dried up a little bit, but we have essentially sort of come through unscathed so far. But we're watching the future and ready to make our steps if we have to.
Very good. We'll be back with more Focus Delaware. Stay right with us. Governor Mike Castle is our guest this evening, and we're talking to him about the state of the state. We're going to talk to you about teachers, a subject that's near and dear to your heart. We've heard a great deal about teachers' salaries, but as pointed out by the Senate Minority Report on its goals and objectives, Delaware will only provide 180 of the 526 new teachers required in 1987. Shouldn't we graduate as many teachers as we need?
Well, that would be a nice goal, but a lot of people come into teaching in odd ways. We have a program at the University of Delaware right now for people to be converted from other jobs to teachers. We bring teachers in from out of state, but there are a lot of people who've been in teaching who drop out and then go back into teaching. And it fills up rather quickly. If you have your salaries where we have our salaries now, you don't seem to have much trouble attracting teachers. We also have a special program to do that. So we're well pleased with our ability to fill our teaching roles right now.
All right. Now, what about your comment on Funnelgate in particular, and about the ethics in government in general?
Well, we are vitally concerned about ethics in government. I happen to think that you've got to start with integrity. If you don't have that, you've got a problem. And it's very important that we protect that. And I think some of the campaign disclosure questions when raised in Delaware really happened because of naivete. I don't think for a minute that anybody did anything that they felt was illegal or wrong or anything of that nature. And I want to change our laws to make them a little clearer, that we report all contributions. You can't contribute between campaigns. You just make things a little bit simpler so that everybody can go out and concentrate on the elections, because we think that's important. They're having problems in Washington. That's a whole different story that we won't get into too much tonight. But these are essential issues. People in Delaware, in my opinion, the politicians in Delaware basically are honest. And given that opportunity, I think that the public can trust them to the fullest. Sometimes the laws need to be changed to make absolutely sure that things are clear enough so there's no question about what's happening.
There's been much speculation on candidates for U.S. Senator, U.S. Congressman, and other offices for the 1988 elections.
I'm not one of them. For those two.
Now, if you had a pick of Lieutenant Governor, who would you pick?
Well, I, of course, have been well pleased with the present Lieutenant Governor, but I have always believed that the Governor and Lieutenant Governor should be of the same party. And for that reason, we will certainly seek the best candidate we can in the Republican Party to run against, whether it be Lieutenant Governor Wu or somebody else. and hopefully we'll be successful in electing that particular person. But I must say, it's a very open-ended process, and if I had to name a name, I really couldn't do it. We have started to in a general way, look at names and consider what we are doing, and we'll probably start to focus more in the next 3 or 4 months. But I think a lieutenant governor should be able to be a governor, and they should be able to help a governor. And those are the two commodities you're looking for, and if we can find that, then we have our candidate, and we'll run that man or woman as hard as we can.
So ultimately, you would endorse one of the candidates that are running?
I would hope to. It may work out that for one reason or another we would not, but most likely we would certainly seek out a candidate or back a candidate who's already come forward himself or herself.
How about this question? Who would you like the Democrats to run for governor in 1988?
I don't know, but anybody I name is probably not who I would like. I'd like to run somebody nobody's ever heard of, for
All
goodness
right.
sake. But I'm sure the Democratic Party will have a good candidate. They understand the importance of the governorship. I expect that. I've never run against anybody I didn't consider to be extraordinarily worthy, and believe me, I'm preparing for it. I prepare for it mostly by trying to be the best governor I can. I think that's what it's really all about. But I fully expect a tough campaign in 1988.
Now, the legislature has established a land use and development as a committee for the first time beginning in 1987. What role do you think state government should play in land use matters which heretofore were locally, strictly local or a home rule matter?
A much more significant role, Bob, than has been played in recent years. I'm a very strong believer that the state, in a small state like Delaware, has a responsibility to provide information. I'm just as strong a believer that the counties and the local communities must listen to that information and must act on it. That must start to happen in our state. And I, as a matter of fact, have recommended funding for some land use people this year in our budget because of that belief. And I hope we can work with the legislature to develop that concept.
All right. Do you expect a need for cooperation then with county and municipal government?
Absolutely. There must be more cooperation than there's been in the past. We are doing quite well now with Newcastle County government. We still have some problems in Kent County and Sussex counties, and we'll work with them. They're very good, strong, independent people, and some of the towns need some help, and we hope to work with them too. We need to coordinate all of these services: highways, natural resources, land use planning.
Do you think the fact that two Delawareans, Senator Biden and Governor DuPont, are both running for president will have any impact on Delaware?
If one of them gets a nomination, it could have a big impact on Delaware. I think everyone enjoys the fact that they're running. I think we're very proud of the fact that we have two candidates running for President of the United States. They're both treated very seriously. I don't think either one is considered to be a candidate who's just doing it for his own personal gain, and whether they get there or not is more problematical. I happen to think that Pete DuPont's one of the finest people I've ever worked with in my life, and I believe he can make the jump from being a small state governor to a president of this country. Not because that's not a big jump, it is, but because he is such a qualified person, because his methods of doing things are so superb that he really can carry out the role. So
What about Senator Biden?
I'm helping him. Well, Joe, as they say, has great charisma. Joe's a wonderful speaker. He's a charming man, and Joe, in his own way, should probably do very well in the Democratic Party. But they're both small state candidates. They both have a long ways to go, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's fun to watch it, I'll tell you that.
It certainly is. Well, thank you, Mike, for coming on Focus Delaware.
Thank you, Bob. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. We've been honored to have our Governor, Mike Castle, on tonight's Focus Delaware show. Join us next week when we'll be looking at county government as Newcastle County President of Newcastle County Council, Karen Peterson, joins us. Thanks for joining us. Take care and enjoy.